Vanessa Feltz on London's radio station.
BBC Radio London.
Weekday mornings from 9.
What can I tell you? Brian May is here and he's not talking about badgers. Quite a surprise and a shock to everybody. Welcome to the studio.
We can talk about badgers if you like.
We'll talk about badgers if we have time. We have
antisocial behaviour everywhere.
Even more pressing matters to talk about. Congratulations, by the way, on last night's superb award. Queen named Living Legends at the Classic Rock Awards. How do you feel about that?
It was a great night, I must say. I love classic rock. I go there every year if I can, if there's a window of opportunity, and I get to meet a lot of my old mates, a lot of whom are my heroes, and some of the younger guys, you know, we're a hero to them or whatever, but it's a nice kind of community. And yes, they gave us this ultimate award of Living Legends, which is great, and I made a little speech, and actually Joe Satriani presented the award to me and made a beautiful speech, which really, I was very choked by the time I got up to speak. It was a really nice night.
Well, I'm particularly glad that after a night of that kind and calibre, you still came to see us here at BBC Radio London. So thank you very much indeed.
Just about.
However, I don't suppose I have to be all that grateful, because this is a subject about which you feel passionately, and it's not just you. We have a tweet from Matthew Wright. Matthew Wright, a dear friend of mine. I know a greatly beloved presenter in this country,
yes.
And he can't be here because he's on the telly at this point.
Of course.
But he'd love to be, and this is what he says. He says, "It's such a shame I can't chip in. Would you please tell Brian, one entire year of my life was ruined. It ended my Radio 2 slot, and all of this happened," says Matthew Wright, "so a rich developer could get richer."
Yeah, this is exactly what it's about.
We're here to talk about what they call iceberg extensions, and these are the basement extensions where people don't just build on or build out or build a conservatory or convert the loft or something. This is where people tunnel under their homes, and it seems as if their aspiration, their subterranean aspirations, have no bounds. So we're talking about underground cinemas and swimming pools and God knows what. So tell me why it is you're here. Why do you object so strongly to this?
Well, personal experience, of course, started it with me, and I had some people 7 years ago next to me buy a plot of land and apply for permission to build a 2-storey basement. That means they go down 2 stories.
Yes.
And we all said, you know, this is going to be a terrible thing for us. Please don't do it.
And let me ask you, in advance of it, so as long as 7 years ago, when it hadn't yet become the norm, as I think it is in many areas of London, why did you know? How did you know that it was going to turn your life into something unbearable?
Well, in that particular case, the only access to this piece of land was an alleyway right next to our bedroom window.
Oh,
so
God.
you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know? But in fact, what happens is these people will destroy your life. They'll destroy the life of their neighbours for probably a minimum of 3 years with this kind of project.
Oh, don't say that.
And you're going to have...
Oh, God, there's one right next to me. Please don't say that.
You
Not
have the
3
noise,
years.
the vibration, which will upset the structure of your house. You have hordes of people in high-vis jackets yelling at each other from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 at night. You have endless traffic. You have things going beep, 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 beep when you're trying to sleep. And it's appalling. I mean,
That's Brian May's phone. You may think he's composing a new sonata. He's not.
I wrote that, actually. I wrote that ringtone many years ago.
Is that true or not?
Yeah, no, it's true. That's true.
I thought it sounded like your... You see, I thought
it's marvellous,
so,
isn't it?
Didn't I? I knew it wasn't the Crazy Frog. I knew it was something a bit more interesting than that. So, I mean, some people, I suppose, listening to this will think these are rich men's problems, because if you live in a council block or on an estate, you're not going to have anyone tunnelling under. It's only people with expensive properties who do this kind of thing. Is that true or fair?
Well, I think we live in an incredibly selfish society now. I think everybody seems, not all of us, but a large proportion of the population are purely out for themselves. And the people who do this kind of thing are motivated purely by trying to make money. These are not people who need houses to live in. They're not people, and we're not talking about building works for people who need to house their families. We're talking about people who are selfish enough to say, okay, I'd like a swimming pool under my house, I'd like a Rolls Royce. The particular case near me, the guy, they've spent 3 years. We have a lot of these people. But this particular guy said, we have to apply for another planning permission. They've already done 3 years. They've messed up our lives for 3 years. But they said the thing is, we've made this underground car park, and we can get a small Rolls Royce in there, but the big Rolls Royce you can get in, but you can't open the door. So we have to take it all to bits and do it again. This is probably another year's work, I'm guessing there. But you are saying that this stuff that you want is more important than the lives of all the people around you. I'm not talking a minor disturbance. I'm talking about a lady who lives near me whose mother died probably of the stress that resulted from this. This is constant. You imagine somebody beating you on the head every day, say 6 days a week for 3 years. You want to kill them in the end. You really, you get beyond the point of anger or, being able to be stable, have a sort of balanced view about it. Your whole body is screaming out that you're being persecuted and you want to get your revenge. Now revenge is a bad thing, but justice is probably a good thing. And I think the law should be changed.
I think what people might not understand if they haven't experienced it as you have is the huge difference between a basement extension and any other building works that you might have.
Yeah.
It is a big pain if there's building next door to you. It's a big pain if they cover their house in scaffolding. It's a big pain if they're having their roof repaired. It's a pain. There's definitely a few vehicles going in and
this
out.
Is a different
but
order
this
of
is a different
magnitude.
level. So
Totally
just explain why the excavation. Because I've got that going on next to me at the moment. That is massive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massive machinery.
Yes.
It's earth-moving machinery for a very long time, for months. And then you have this pile-driving thing. Now, you either have this enormous thing which basically fires a heavy weight at the ground and your whole house will shake, or you have something which is probably worse, which is this kind of screw arrangement which makes a screeching noise. You cannot possibly sleep through it.
No.
Going in your garden is out of the question. There's no way you can go, and it upsets people, it upsets animals.
I should just add, it's absolutely filthy as well.
It's disgusting.
It's
you've got
filthy.
noise, you've got dust, you've got people running around in high-vis jackets yelling at each other, and you've got endless traffic shaking your house, and you lose your privacy, you lose your sleep.
On a technical level, do we know what it does to, for example, the sewers, for example, the water supply?
Well, that's another question.
For example, because none of us can forget the very recent sinkhole that suddenly opened in that street in St Albans. You remember?
Right.
It was absolutely extraudinary. Suddenly this vast chasm
Yes.
sort of seemed to erupt from nowhere. How do we know that these enormous and extraordinarily gargantuan basement extensions aren't doing something, devastating to the infrastructure?
Well, they're definitely interfering with the water table. There's no doubt about that. There's been a lot of questions about that, yes. And some of the basements that have been built, in spite of the fact that they were probably built according to standards, got flooded. Now you realise that you're messing with something very serious there. And of course there is a flooding problem in Kensington, and this is adding to it. The water has nowhere to go.
Yeah.
They should have thought about it a long time ago. They have porous pavements in other cities, and the water can drain away. We have a city covered in concrete, and now becoming peppered with basements, and there is nowhere for that water to go. We're heading for a very serious situation. People, it needs looking at government level, but unfortunately we have a government that is not open to things like that.
But we don't need to go to government level straight away. What about local council planning level? Have you not been there and wearing your wonderful jacket that you're wearing now, which is festooned with cockerels, and said, look, I'm Brian May, for God's sake, listen to me, please, I've got a bit of a platform, can't you listen to me? You are driving us all mad, we can't stand it. You've got to tell people they can't do this anymore.
I've had discussions, yes. It doesn't matter who I am, but I'm a persistent person, and I've helped some of the neighbours get some of their complaints together. What happens is, actually the Kensington Borough Council have made a little concession. They said they will only allow single-storey underground basements to be built as opposed to double.
Right.
And they've limited the amount of garden that can be used. But really, it's too little too late. There are too many people who've already got permission, and they're still destroying our lives. Basically, you need to stop it. It has to be stopped. Really, there is no point. This is pure selfishness.
Do you think there is a basis for saying, you bought a 4-bedroomed house with 2 reception rooms and an eat-in kitchen. You knew that's what you were buying. Your aspirations for this house are ludicrous. You have not bought a house that has a subterranean swimming pool. You're not expecting one. You haven't got one. No streets and no houses in this street have one. If you want that, move out to the country where there's a swimming pool or where you've got more space. Is it possible to say that? Like, you wouldn't want a helicopter landing pad, and if you did, you couldn't, because it's not suitable in that kind of area.
It's disproportionate development, yes, and for reasons which are not valid, And this business of, if you live in a council house, you're probably immune from that. But, I come from a poor background too, and you work all your life to try and get someplace which you think you'll have some peace and quiet in for the end of your days. And to me, it's a travesty. Kensington no longer is a nice, peaceful place to live in. It's appalling. You can't move for basement developments, and the place is destroyed.
Have you considered selling and moving?
Yeah, very seriously.
And what's the story with that? Do people not want to buy because you're buying next to a building site?
No, that I haven't got that far, because it's such major disruption. You imagine trying to move everything. We spend a long time. We actually moved into our present house because of a previous basement development, because of this 7-year one, thinking that we would get some peace and quiet. And then this guy called Bizarri started off, and basically I have another one opposite, and now 2 houses directly opposite to us have been sold, and they're applying for planning permission. The guy bought 2 houses. He says he's going to live in one and build a basement in that one. He's going to develop the other one next to him purely for financial reasons, for investment reasons.
Right.
And, we will suffer. So maybe we will have to move out. But it's horrible. You don't want to move.
You know how we have the right to light? That's part of our human rights as citizens of London. We have the right to light. And that means you can't just slam up a wall right next to your neighbour's window. You can't put an enormous dense tree right close to your neighbour's window because we have a right to light.
Yeah,
Do
there
we
should
not
be
have
a
some
right
to peace and quiet
I
or
would
something?
have thought so. I'm hoping that
harmony.
some clever lawyer somewhere is going to find out that there is a law which says we do have the right to peace and quiet.
Yeah.
It's very. I mean, I have had some great people working on it, and it's very hard to do that. But I think that the mere fact that people get planning permission should not give them permission to do this business of wrecking people's lives for years on end.
I mean, I'm here with Brian May of Queen, as you know. He's talking about these basement extensions. Now, it could be you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't care about this. It's not.
You will care when it comes next to you, though.
Yeah, but you may be thinking, it doesn't apply to me. I live in a block of flats. I don't own a property. He's lucky to even have a house. What's he banging on about? Why doesn't he stop moaning? You may even be thinking, well, if he wanted to do one, he'd sure as anything do it. He wouldn't care about the neighbours next door.
You think so? You're making a very big assumption there.
Well, I don't know what
wouldn't.
people... I can't never assume that everyone listening feels the same. So who knows what people listen with? But I'll tell you this. Straight after this trail, Brian, we're going to be talking to Councillor Tim Coleridge of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. He's a Cabinet Member for Planning Policy, and we are going to be asking him a few questions. That will happen straight after this.
BBC Radio London.
Well, I'm here with Brian May, and we're on the line now to Councillor Tim Coleridge of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. Tim, hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. I think I'll let Brian May talk to you because I think he's living this, he's breathing this, and he's absolutely full of indignation and frustration. And I think actual despair. He looks to me as if he's exuding existential despair. So let him talk to you. Brian, you're on to Councillor Tim Coleridge. What would you like to say to him?
Hello, Tim. I think we may have spoken or communicated in some way anyway. I've certainly talked to a lot of your people who've tried to be helpful, I have to say. How do you feel about this?
Well, this has been the biggest issue in terms of planning for our residents, I would say, for the last 20 years.
20 years, wow.
Oh, they started building basements about 20 years ago. It became really a big issue about 5 years ago when the number of basements and the size of basements just took off. And I think it was partly because of the much better engineering that there is, and partly because there seems to be an awful lot of money in London. And people have a sort of concept of this kind of contemporary living where they want to have all these underground rooms and media rooms and swimming pools and these things.
And they're being encouraged by builders, of course, touting for business. It's become a huge business.
Yeah. And we realised it was a very big issue, and we have taken steps to bring in new planning rules in Kensington and Chelsea, which are by far the most advanced and draconian in the United Kingdom.
And what are they? What are the rules as they stand today, on this day?
Well, first of all, we've outlawed, starting from the 26th of January this year, you cannot build more than a single basement under your house.
That's a good step. Yeah.
That makes some difference. Secondly, which I think is really catching people, is you can't build over more than 50% of your garden. Now, it doesn't matter how big your garden is. If your garden's a long garden, you can get quite a big basement. If your garden is only 5 foot long, you can build like 2.5 feet. And what we've seen, in fact, in the first 7 months of this year is the number of basement applications dropping by nearly 2/3. Now, whether that is a sign of the times and the economy and all sorts of things, or whether they've all been built, I don't know. But if that trend continues, we will see in our streets many less of these ghastly hoardings. Some of the streets around where I live in Chelsea, you can have 4 or 5 basements on the go at the same time.
In a single street, yeah.
But sorry, Tim, may I interrupt to ask a question?
Yeah.
but I live in NW8. I've got exactly the same thing going on. As it happens, it turns out right next door to me, so I do know of which I speak at this point, unfortunately. Why would it not be possible to say that when you buy a house of a certain character and a certain size, you know that it stops at ground level, or there's just a basement kitchen or something, and you're not allowed to change empirically the character of your house, and you can't have a swimming pool underground, and you can't have an underground car park, or as you call it, a media room, because that's not what you bought. You knew perfectly well if you were buying into a street in Kensington or Chelsea or St John's Wood or anywhere else that's not what you're buying. Why can you not say that it hugely changes the character of the home that you've acquired?
Well, it's a simple answer to that. The only houses where you can't build any kind of basement at all in our borough are under grade 2 listed houses.
But can you not change that?
Yes, can't
Could
you
you
change
not
that?
actually change that?
We took a view, I mean, the planning law, national planning law, effectively for many years has had the view that if you build a basement under your house, what does the house look like before and after? And the answer is, it looks exactly the same.
It's a very shallow view, if I may say, isn't it?
That's
because
a very
it
funny
doesn't
joke.
take
Very
into account.
Very deep view, actually.
Thank you for my joke.
No, but the problem is that planning law was never designed to control basements. If you build a basement onto your farmhouse in the middle of Yorkshire, no one could care less.
Exactly.
But when you're building your basement, when you're 2 feet from your neighbour, it really is a very big issue.
Surely, Tim, it's got to be stopped, hasn't it? It's got way out of proportion now. Surely you need to stop them altogether.
No, we can't. What we did, we took a view as to what would we be able to get past the planning inspectorate. For those listening who don't understand how these things perhaps work, local councils can't just change the law. We have no authority to do that. All authority comes from Parliament. When we want to change a policy, we have to write a policy. We have to consult with the public, which includes developers and the residents. Then we have to go to an examination, which means a public hearing in front of a planning inspector. And we have to prove that our policy is what they call sound. And that effectively means it has to be reasonable and there has to be justification for it. Now, to go out and say in the present economic climate, we want to ban all basements in Kensington and Chelsea, no more building of basements at all. Some people say that's entirely unfair because you can build them. And you can build them quite cleverly, and you can build them perfectly soundly.
But you can't build them in less than 3 years and without destroying your neighbours' lives. No, well, it's not possible as far as I can see.
The single basement down can be built much more quickly than that. And
well, how quickly,
in that case, these people need to be brought to justice for not doing that and not giving due care and attention.
No, you can build it. The main difficulty with building basements is number one, the grinding and the taking out of the spoil. And we have got much tougher rules now on how that has to be done. Some of the very awkward places, like little cul-de-sacs, narrow streets and so on, we are clamping down on people having the wrong kind of lorry. They've got to bag up the stuff and take it out in sacks. The really noisy bit, which is like the breaking of any concrete, we are bringing in a new code of practice.
You've got pile driving as well and continual earth moving.
But for the first time, we've just been consulting on this, but very soon, hopefully in the new year, when you put in an application for a basement, it won't just be, I want to build a basement and get permission. You'll have to put in at the same time precisely how you're going to do the construction traffic management plan, which is actually how you're going to get the stuff out, and also what the noise level is going to be. And that has to be known at the time of the application so residents can understand it. And then we can say to people, you will have to take mitigation efforts to actually reduce that noise. And there's an awful lot that we're going to be doing to make it actually not quite so ghastly to live next door to somebody in the basement. And can I add this thing too, Brian, is that if anyone builds a basement next to you, they can only now ever do it once.
Because you've got someone doing it twice.
There's an awful lot of houses within earshot, though.
You can only do it once.
Yeah, I know. But, it can go on forever, and I think we probably will have to move, because we have three ongoing in our street, and we have 2 more probably going to come up in the next few months.
Let me ask you, though, a little bit, Tim, about, we're all quite used to the phrase the right to light. We know that means you can't just slap up a wall or a fence or a great big tree or something right next to your neighbour's window because we have the right to light. What about the right to peaceful, tranquil, serene enjoyment of our own homes? When you give permission for one of these basement extensions, Brian says it's going to take 3 years. I've been told I think the one next to me might take 2. I think that probably means 3, doesn't it? If you're lucky, etc. So we know that in real terms...
This is constant noise.
Exactly. So what I'm asking you is, I've got a new baby grandchild. My daughter wants to come and visit me. I'm her mother. We need the baby to be able to sleep. That kind of thing. We've got elderly people. Brian's got neighbours who are being driven to distraction by this. They're in the twilight of their lives. They want to have some kind of sanctuary and peace and tranquility in their own homes. Do residents of London not have some entitlement to peace, which will be eroded immediately by planning permission being given for basement extension?
I would say that they absolutely do have certainly moral rights to peace. And in fact, we've made planning history by persuading the planning inspectorate that although an individual basement is perfectly feasible to build in terms of engineering and can be completed and the house looks the same on the surface when it's finished, it was the cumulative effect in the streets of having so many done at the same time that was reducing the quality of life for our residents.
Quality of life is the right phrase.
We thought we'd never get that through because that in national planning law, it doesn't make much. It doesn't really count the noise, and they accept the noise has to happen.
That's Secondly, right. I mean, when we tried to stop this happening, we were told we couldn't protest on the grounds of the disturbance we were going to have to suffer.
We've done everything we can to do that. And let me just finish.
And you have changed that, yeah. So
no, the new things, Brian, you may not know about. I mean, as from next year, when
no, I do know. I promise
we're going to restrict building after 6 o'clock in the evening. We're going to restrict all noisy building on Saturdays for the first time. At the moment, you can build between 8 o'clock in the morning and 1 o'clock.
And what are you restricting it to?
They won't be allowed to do it. You won't be allowed to bring in great big, chunky skips and drop them in the street, and you won't be allowed to be cutting steel, and you won't be allowed to be breaking concrete. Saturday mornings, we now want to be quiet. Now, of course, the developers are saying to us during this consultation, that will add 10% or 20% to the cost to our clients.
Well, tough.
Tough.
I can't comment on that. But what we do know is that our residents have indicated that they will appreciate having some peace and quiet on Saturday.
That would really make a difference. That's a very good step, I say. But I do think you should stop them.
Let me ask you something else, Tim. What about sewers and the water table and the suspension of the house next door and all the other things that we don't quite know might result from this kind of tunnelling? As Brian says, there's nowhere for the water to drain away. We know that London's a concrete city. There's trouble anyway. We see that sinkhole opening up in St Albans suddenly in a normal residential street. There's a vast chasm opening up. Are we setting ourselves up for some real trouble later on with all these basement extensions?
We've had lots of reports done on this. We had a very big one done by Arif and Partners, and we had one done by Alan Baxter and Partners as well. We've taken measures now that by restricting the basement to 50% of the garden, you've still got a 50% soak away. You also have to have on top of your basement, if it's in the garden, at least 1 metre of soil, and that allows the water to drain away as well. There was no evidence, I'm afraid, from Arif and Partners that building basements would stop the water basically draining away and so on. The main problem actually in Kensington and Chelsea from flooding, if ever we get it, is to do with the fact that these sewers in K&C are the old Victorian ones, and the foul drainage water from your house goes into the same sewers that the rainwater goes. So when you have very, very heavy rain, the water drains off the tarmac roads, down into the storm drains, into the same sewers. And if it rains very, very heavily for very short periods of time, that can get, you can fill the sewers up. But, of course, in time, we're going to have the Thames Tideway Tunnel and all these things to help alleviate that. But the measures we've taken now to try and get sustainable drainage in people's gardens and to prevent people tarmacking or concreting over their entire garden, over their basement, is another measure that will allow sustainable drainage.
So, Tim, where you lead, will other councils follow, or is this just a path that you are carving yourselves and nobody else is listening?
I think Westminster are going to be following, I'm told, almost precisely what we've been doing as well. And we've taken an additional measure, by the way, which is to, as from April the 26th in 2016, you won't be allowed to build a basement if it's just under the footprint of your house without planning consent. Because at the moment, if it's just under the footprint of your house, it's deemed to be permitted development under the permitted development rules. We say that is not right because whilst you can build the basement, you cause just as much annoyance to your neighbours with the skips and the suspensions and the drilling and the noise.
Absolutely.
If you go just under the house or also under the garden. So from next year, under a thing called an Article 4, we are withdrawing permitted development rights. So everybody will need to get planning consent, and then we can control how they do it, how they take the spoil away, how much noise they make, and how they control the lorries coming and going. And that will bring some more peace to our residents.
And the not building on a Saturday starts when? Just so we can start picketing and placarding.
I can't give you the precise date because we've got to look at the consultation and then we have to, but it should be hopefully early in the new year.
Thank you very much
I
indeed.
think you're doing well, Tim, I have to say, but I would like to see more, if you don't mind me saying.
You're not going to build one, Brian, are you?
Sorry?
Are you going to build one?
I'm actually a fairly responsible person. I wouldn't do it to my neighbours, I promise you. I try to be a decent neighbour. I mean, I try not to mow the lawn on a Sunday or something.
Well, if I could afford your street, I'd come and live next door to you. That'd be really nice.
Well, I wish you would, and then hopefully I won't get some horrible basement building bastard instead of you.
Thank you, Councillor Tim Coleridge. I mean, there's no question they are trying to do some quite dramatic things to curb it. All right, we've got quite a few calls flowing in on this. I won't use the word flood because that's the last thing we want when we're talking about basement extensions. I'm here with Brian May of Queen. He feels very strongly about this. You might say, well, he would, wouldn't he? It's happening in his backyard. If it were not, he wouldn't care less about it.
Well,
but it's happening in mine too, and it seems to be... I mean, Rachel Johnson has been writing about this. It's happening in Notting Hill to the max. And
Can
we've
I just say...
No, because we're just going to get some news headlines, but I've got a caller here in Queen's Park whose parents moved out of Marylebone purely because of these basement extensions. So, it might come to somewhere near you, lovely listener, even when you least suspect that it will. Just imagine living next door to it. So the number's 0207 224 2000, and we'll be straight back with Brian May after the news headlines.
And the Queen guitarist Brian May has accused people who build basement extensions of pure selfishness and says they're destroying their neighbours' lives. As you've just heard, he's told Vanessa 3 are under construction in his own street in West London, and he says his life has been blighted by the constant noise and disruption. He's branded Kensington and Chelsea Council's decision to restrict basement extensions too little, too late.
2000. I'm here with Brian May of Queen. Obviously, we're talking about basement extensions which have become so prevalent in certain London streets that some are utterly incapacitated by. They're forced into a kind of hellish existence, going around skips and lorries and trucks and noise and hoardings and everything else. Let's talk to Kieran in Queen's Park. Hi, Kieran. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning, Vanessa.
Tell me about what happened with your mum and dad.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief because I don't have much juice left on my phone. But basically, they have been living in Marylebone for the past 16, 17 years.
Yes.
Have always lived in London. And they live in they used to live in a small mews just off Marylebone High Street.
Yeah.
So I know you've been talking about Kensington and Chelsea. This is obviously Westminster.
Yes.
But same problems. Anyway, about 2 years ago, there was a developer who put in a proposal to do the first double basement of its kind in Marylebone. And all the residents, especially, the residents of that street, of that little mews, were, completely sort of appalled and upset by it, by the fact that, what kind of disturbance, it was going to cause in terms of trucks and all kinds of things. Just to give you a brief sort of idea of the mews, it's a tiny little mews street just off Marylebone High Street. At the end of the mews is an entrance to Princess Grace Hospital.
Oh, I know where you mean, exactly, yes.
Okay, so they need clear access going sort of in and out of there.
Yes.
There's also a very well-known cranial osteopath who also has his practice in that little mews, which he obviously needs, sort of a degree of quietness to treat his patients. And also, what's even worse is that there is a special needs school of some kind in that mews. And again, I'm talking about people who need, a quiet sort of environment in which to benefit from the type of treatment they're having.
Of course.
On top of that, you've got, residents who have been there, a lot of them for a long time. I mean, my parents, have been there, as I say, for 16, or were there for 16 years. But there were others who've been there for, 50 years plus. So, a slightly older sort of type of, resident living there. My dad's 81 now, my mum's 10 years younger. And, not to mention that their friends and neighbours who are older than them. Anyway, to cut a long story short, my dad set up a campaign against this, got 500 signatures, which I think was the most for this kind of campaign. It was talked about, going on for a year and a half, incredibly stressful. Was it going to be given the green light? Was it not? This developer, I think, was an Arab and had just sort of swanned in with all his money and, didn't take into account the impact it was going to have, and all the the arguments sort of going against why it should go ahead were looked at, but they weren't taken. They weren't taken seriously.
Yes.
So they gave him permission to do this double basement. Trucks have been careering around, knocking into posts, knocking lamp posts over. There's absolutely no space to do this kind of double basement in this tiny mews. And my parents aren't the only ones to have moved out. Their friends and elderly neighbours have also moved out, and the cranial osteopath has relocated. I don't know what's happened to the special needs school. It's and the stress it's caused my parents, and not to mention all the others, is disgraceful. And I don't know who you were talking to earlier on, because I only just switched on the radio in the car.
Councillor at Kensington and Chelsea. They do seem to be, in fairness to them, doing various restrictive things to try and stop it being as hellish as it is.
Absolutely, but I think at the end of the day, there are quite a few of us Londoners who are quite cynical and think, well, are these developers throwing money? They're giving money to the right people and they're getting the green light for the wrong reasons.
Brian, if you want to respond to Kieran and what she's been going through, what her parents have been going through. I sympathise
so hugely, and I've seen, people, it started off being me, but now I'm fighting for the people around me. And actually we're fighting for a studio, Air Studios in North London. This is just another case. I mean, their livelihood depends, of course, on peace and quiet. NW, I think they are.
Right.
And we've used they're wonderful studios, worldwide acclaimed studios. They need quiet to record. They've got a basement coming up, development coming up right next to them, which will destroy their business for at least 12 months.
Yes.
So how come people are given permission to do this? I mean, surely you have to take into account that you're destroying people's lives and livelihoods.
Kieran, do reply, yeah.
Sorry, just very briefly, but I think that's exactly the point. I think it's all very well, put your application in, and if you're not getting complaints from residents, if it's in an area that's not going to bother people, I know that's, unlikely, but that's fine. But if you do get all these residents, if you get someone setting up a campaign, and if you've got hospital, the special needs, the cranial osteopath, etc., that, I think more attention needs to be put onto each individual case and dealt with very sensitively, and at the moment it's not.
It's a very good point. I think each case on its own merits, and if it's plain that it's going to disrupt the whole neighbourhood, then, common sense tells you, no, you can't do this. You cannot do this to a mews house. It's disgraceful. It is a disgrace.
Kieran, thank you so much for the call. Really appreciate it. Now, if anyone doubts Brian May on this issue, we do have a recording from his personal telephone. Brian, just tell us what this is that we're about to hear.
Have you got it queued up? Yeah,
it's queued
this
up.
is the pile driving phase, which will, in our case,
what does that mean, pile driving?
Basically, to build basements, they have to tunnel down directly, vertically down, and it can be done in various ways. They're all incredibly noisy and disruptive. They'll shake your house to the foundations. And it's impossible to find any room in your house. I have double glazing everywhere because I had to, triple glazing in some cases. You cannot get away from this noise. Going into your garden is out of the question. There's no way. So in the summer months, you would want to be using your garden if you have one. A lot of us fight, work all our lives to have a garden.
Of course.
You can't do it, and the noise is just incessant. It will drive you mad. This particular screw kind of
all right,
piling
we've got it queued up. So if you think that Brian is making a farce, you don't believe that the noise is really that much of a big deal.
And bear in mind, this noise is so loud. If you're standing in your garden, you wouldn't be able to have a conversation. It's that loud. You can't hear yourself speak. This is the level.
Here it is. Wow.
This is what you will be trying to live with 6 days a week.
How long would you say that this level of noise would be going on? For how long?
It's a number of months, that particular phase.
Of that noise all day, every day?
Yeah. Basically 5 or 6 days a week, because they're doing Saturdays as well in our case.
Wow. Let's go now to Oliver Froment. He joins us on the line, and he's the chair of the Camden Residents Association Action Committee. Hello, Oliver. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Have you and Brian May encountered one another before in this crusade?
If I've encountered other cases, absolutely, and I tell you, I can talk about my case because it's a live case. You got in my case, you got an absentee developer owner of a house in Pilgrim's Lane.
Where's Pilgrim's Lane?
Pilgrim's Lane is in Hampstead Village in North London.
Yep.
and it's the absentee, a certain Biola person has been trying for 5 years to get her way into having a very dangerous basement that could endanger my properties and that of the other neighbors.
Right. Why do you say it's dangerous? Why is it dangerous?
Well, it's dangerous because we hired a number of expert consultants, including also a geologist such as Michael De Freitas from Imperial College, and they all shown that there is a high probability that my house could be severely damaged, or worst case scenario, be very severely damaged or worse. And it's just there's a very high chance, and these are experts. There's the fellows were supposed to go into there was an appeal. The inspectorate decided that it was so complex that it would need to go to a full day, 6 days inquiry next year, and the fellows then pull out of the application, doubtless because they felt they were on shaky ground.
Okay, what's the punchline? What's happening now?
Well, what's happening now? There is they put application for permitted development. Basically, they try every time to get around the system, and the bottom line in a number of those cases is the applicant, the developer, can make substantial amount of money, and they will use any means try to get around their way. Spend tire you for legal fight, trying to influence people one way or another. It's just put it threats and they have all to win and the neighbors have to lose, and it's very socially undesirable.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. It's pure greed, really, that you're talking about. People just looking for a profit.
Well, although some people will say they want to live there and enjoy the subterranean swimming pool and watch films in the delight. I mean, I've just got a text and it says this. It says in Kensington they've restricted it to one level. But this person says I'm about to have a year of horror because our neighbours want to create a basement wardrobe. And this person says seriously stupid. Our terrace is listed. And the whole row is one whole unit. So the whole lot could be affected just for one person's dresses. Totally wrong.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, I think there is more to it because not only, it's one thing to have 1 year or 2 years of hell, but on top of it, the innocent neighbors can have their property severely damaged, and it could, and it can last for years. And I think there is nothing, to give incentive for people to build. There's a shortage of housing in this country. There is a need for building new housing for lower income people and also middle income people.
Exactly.
But putting incentive and I think the government, the Boris Johnson, they are right to give incentive. But where they're totally wrong is to create an environment where everything is okay. Where creating a basement that doesn't really luxury basement that don't create new supply of housing.
Yeah, I think it's a good distinction to make. I mean, you're talking about speculative building purely to make money, really, and I think that's the distinction that ought to be made.
Well, Oliver, thank you very much. Oliver, thanks a lot. I suppose you don't know that. You don't know whether your neighbours are buying a building underneath because they really want to, use the boot room and the wine cellar and the cigar thermidor.
They need a swimming pool and they need a place to park their Rolls Royce, and they discovered it wasn't.
Well, they would say it's not speculative. They want to park their actual Rolls Royce, which they actually own, and they want it increases hugely their enjoyment of their home, and that's what they want to do.
No, in one case, I have people applying for a permission exactly opposite me at this moment, and the guy has actually said, I've bought two houses next to one another. One of them I'm going to build a basement in because I want to live in it. The other one I'm going to do purely as an investment. Yeah, so we are going to suffer purely because he wants to make more money.
We're capitalists. We're not against investment in this country.
But he's a rich man making money because he's rich, out of being rich.
We're going to have a trail, and then we're going to speak to a building company specialising in basement extensions.
Oh, hooray.
I'm here with Brian May. I'm sure the voice is familiar. We will be back straight after this. I'm here with Brian May. We're in conversation, as you can hear. And on the line is Simon Haslam, Managing Director of Basement Force. Hello, Simon.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm sure you're in no doubt of the fact that you're not speaking to one of your greatest fans. This is nothing personal, but Brian May, I think he is perfectly capable of speaking for himself, but I mean, he is fundamentally kind of empirically, philosophically opposed to the idea of basement extensions. Can you explain to us the great allure and appeal of them? Why do people like them so much?
Why do people like them?
Yeah.
It's a function of wanting living space. And I was listening just a moment ago, and the previous caller was talking about supply, and so basements, people want space. The value of property makes it such that it is worth building, in this expensive way in some parts of London.
So you're saying,
and that's why.
You are saying, I mean, I would agree with you in some cases. Some people want a bit of space, but mainly people are doing it to make money, aren't they?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, obviously, a developer, if a developer buys a property, he's buying it as part of his business. If a homeowner is looking to increase space, then they're doing it generally for their own use and to increase the size of their property. Now, some people will be doing things like swimming pools and garages, but it's not the majority. My experience is that's not the majority. And I suppose there is another matter. If somebody owns a property and they are lawfully allowed to build a swimming pool or a garage, then whilst others might find that not what they want others to do, then they are allowed to do that.
But but hang on a minute, Simon, what about the consequences for the people who live in the neighbourhood? Because it is very, very different living next door to somebody building a loft conversion, or somebody building a conservatory, or somebody building one of those extensions into the side passage of your house, which we've all lived next door to that. That's not very nice when it's going on, but it's fairly brief, a bit brutal, then brief, then over. This is a whole different matter involving excavation and the setting down of foundations and the gel-igniting of whatever it is that's already there, and the most a hellish noise, dust and everything else for months, years, sometimes 3-4 years at a stretch, and it's a completely different experience from the normal building works that we grew up with.
I'm not aware of any gel igniting.
Oh, you know what I mean. Well, I don't know the technical terms, but the noise, that thing that you do when you blast out whatever's down there and put new stuff down.
You're aware of a lot of disruption, though, aren't you? I mean, do you feel okay about that you are destroying people's lives around you? You think that's okay? Even though you got planning permission?
Well, I would say that, there's other laws and regulations that govern the control of construction impact from building works, but let's put that to one side. So I would say sometimes these jobs create a lot of impact, and sometimes they create a lot less impact. So a lot of the jobs which we do, I end up talking to neighbours afterwards, and they say that was nowhere near as bad as we expected.
Oh, I'd like to meet these people.
Well,
and how long does your basement project typically take?
It absolutely depends on the size, the location,
just roughly,
the access. But roughly, I mean, the smallest is going to be something like 3 months, and the longest we've done is probably about a year.
Good Lord! Well, you're not talking about the scale of stuff that I'm seeing, where people are still doing it 7 years later.
7 years sounds like something's probably. My suspicion is something's not worked on the funding side, and someone started and stopped and started and stopped.
It's been continuous, but it's a very large development, But it's in a rural. It's in a residential area, and people. I had to move away, and so did many other people. Do you feel okay about this? Do you not sometimes think, good Lord, I know you have to do a job, you have a business to run, but the people around you do as well, and you're destroying their ability to work.
We could close it. Yeah, I mean, building works and working is a tricky one, for people running businesses. It is, but you see, there's a real problem. If you were to say, you are going to stop building works because
basement
they are
building
causing...
works. Yeah.
Do you accept that there's a whole different level of disruption involved in a basement extension from any other kind of building work? It really is a completely different level of disruption. Do you accept that, Simon?
Not in every case, no.
It's a very inefficient way of working, isn't it, though? I mean, you're basically propping up a house and excavating under it, and it would be much quicker in many cases to knock the whole thing down and start again.
Well, again, you can't say that as an absolute. If you say it as an absolute, it doesn't really work. Saying it as in some cases, knocking a house down might be better, and in some cases it may not. That's not really the driver of I would say, of the impact that a construction project causes.
But the impact is enormous. Surely you do realise that, don't you? Do you not lose sleep over it at all?
Because you see, what we haven't said, actually, none of us have said this so far, is that the people having the basement extension never live in the premises while it's going on. They can't, because otherwise the house might fall down on them. So they have to move out. So they're never there for the nasty bits. They don't live there when the drilling. Yes, it is true. You don't live in your house while you're having a basement extension. People always move out. They're always very wealthy anyway. They move out, leaving the neighbours to take up the flack, and that's so they never experience this relentless noise, do they?
Yes, that's not the case. We build basements where we go underneath houses that are remaining occupied, so the people having the works done are living above the work.
How can you do that physically? How does that work?
God.
Where do you tunnel under from if the people are in the house?
Either say we can tunnel under from a front garden, or we can tunnel underneath by taking, say, a front room of a property, and then we take the floor out and then tunnel from there.
You're talking about enormous noise and disruption, aren't you? I mean, the pile driving. You must do pile driving, I'm sure, and earth moving, the whole thing.
It's piling. So there's driving is when things are struck on the top, and you won't get pile driving like that in London. That would be sort of the thing you'd do, in a river, somewhere outside London.
You don't get it well. I'm sorry, you're wrong. You get piling rigs everywhere in London.
No, they're piling rigs, correct, but they're the screw
the rotary ones are just as bad as the other ones.
No. If you had a,
you should live where I live. Come and live next door to a piling rig, a screw piling rig, and see if you enjoy it.
Let me ask you. But let me ask you this, Simon. If I were to say, and obviously it wouldn't be good for your business, but if I were to say that really basement extensions are not suitable for London. They're not suitable. They're fine for bits of Essex that are much more rural. They're fine for bits of Harpenden. They're fine in the countryside, and they're fine in other places where in general properties have much more land about them and much more space between them and their neighbours. But in London and possibly Manchester and Birmingham and other highly densely populated conurbations, they are just not suitable. They're iniquitous in terms of life. They ruin the lives of babies and elderly people, and they disturb people's tranquility in their own homes, which after all is the only place they're allowed to have any tranquility. Where else can you take refuge if it's not your own home? And the whole Englishman's home is his castle. They don't mean a real castle with a moat and tunnelling under. They mean whatever house you bought in the first place. And if you put on a porch or a conservatory, okay. You want to paint the bedroom pink, paint it pink, but you can't have a blinking swimming pool underneath your house in London.
Well, conversely, so you say an Englishman's house is his castle. Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're saying that from the neighbours, from the unhappy neighbour's point of view. Yeah. But then from the owner's point of view, that's also his castle. So, he has a right to build on his property.
He doesn't have the right to destroy the lives of everyone around him. Please, surely you can admit that. I mean, it's his castle, but I have a castle too in that case, but I do not cause my neighbours distress. I try to be considerate in every way. I won't even mow the blooming lawn on a Sunday because you have some kind of respect for your neighbours. These people around me have no respect for me. They're saying, our extension, our basement is more important than your quality of life. And to be honest, we don't give a toss. We are going to keep on doing this for the next 3 years. After these people finish, there will be another house doing the same thing. So I'm faced, and all my neighbours are faced with, basically, this is the way it will be till the end of our lives. We will have some new bastard. Excuse me.
We can't. That's the second person to use that word on my show. I apologise if anyone's offended.
It's very hard not to use these words. I apologise.
I know you've done well not to, but let's just say very sorry in case anyone's offended by that.
I do apologise.
Simon, I thank you very much. I think you've been very robust actually, because you've deflected each question very, very well and with good humour, for which we certainly thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Simon Haslam, there, Managing Director of Basement Force. And I suppose it's in fairness we have to say if people didn't want them, they wouldn't have them. People obviously do desire them. This is from Jude in Ealing, who says, Vanessa and Brian, how lovely to hear you with Vanessa, by the way, Brian. I won't ever have the problems you're having, as I live in a fairly modest street in the borough of Ealing, but I just know I would absolutely hate it. This is Jude being empathetic. 3 years of noise and disruption would seriously do me in. It's bad enough when someone decides to build a regular extension at the back of their home, or a loft extension, which is popular in my area. In regards to this basement extension, though, how selfish and insular people can be. Why has this awful practice come about? I have to say, says Jude, I've worked in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea for years, and it seems to me always to have been a building site.
It certainly has been for a very long time. Yeah. And it's getting worse.
And this says, Vanessa, interesting conversation with Brian May. Has Brian considered pursuing litigation under the Human Rights Act? Surely this comes under a right to family life and a right to peaceful enjoyment of your property.
Interesting. I wonder. I have some very good people working on it, but maybe we need to look deeper.
And Annie in Chiswell Green says people who build basements in built-up areas should have to pay compensation to every neighbour of £5,000 a month.
That wouldn't even cover, I don't think, the distress, I must say. You know, you're not talking about minor distress. You're talking about people really having nervous breakdowns. Yeah, but compensation, yes, I would agree.
This is Val Whedon, MBE, who says, I started a campaign with Spike Milligan way back in 1990. It was called The Right to Peace and Quiet. And Val Whedon says, I cannot believe we're still talking about this. I, in those days, got an MBE for my campaigning work. Wow. The Right to Peace and Quiet. Brian May, thank you very much indeed. I know you're very busy and I know you've got to go, but we've got so many calls on this. We will continue this discussion straight after the 11 o'clock news. Thank you very much. If you want to come and talk about badgers, come and talk about badgers or anything else you like. And congratulations on the award last night. We'll be straight back after the 11 o'clock news.